My name is Alexandra Mitchell, and I learned early in life that some sisters aren't meant to be best friends. Sophia, my older sister by 3 years, made sure I understood that from the moment I could walk. Growing up, Sophia was always the star of the family. Straight A's, student body president, champion debater, she collected achievements like others collected stamps. Our parents' pride in her was matched only by their constant disappointment in me. Where Sophia excelled in public speaking, I preferred quiet research. While she dominated social circles, I spent hours in the library, studying patterns in law and business that others overlooked. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became the soundtrack of my childhood, playing on repeat at every family dinner, every parent-teacher conference, every holiday gathering. But what no one knew, what Sophia never noticed through her veil of superiority, was that I was building something. Something bigger than high school accolades or college acceptance letters. It started during my junior year of high school. While Sophia was celebrating her acceptance to Harvard Law School, I was quietly launching my first legal consulting business from my bedroom. Using online forums and anonymous profiles, I began connecting struggling law firms with the resources they needed to succeed. By the time I graduated high school, I had built a network of over 50 law firms that relied on my research and strategies. Of course, none of them knew they were working with a teenager. "I just don't understand you, Alexandra," my mother sighed at my high school graduation. "Sophia's going to Harvard, and you're taking a gap year to figure things out." What is there to figure out? I didn't tell them that my gap year was actually the first phase of my business expansion plan. I didn't mention that the modest savings account they thought I had was actually approaching 7 figures. And I certainly didn't reveal that 3 of the top law firms in Boston had already hired my consulting company, not knowing they would soon be working with their star student's little sister. Sophia thrived at Harvard, of course. Every holiday break brought new stories of her success, new reasons for our parents to beam with pride. Meanwhile, I built my empire in silence. When my parents pressed me about college, I enrolled in online business courses, letting them believe I was at least trying, while I orchestrated mergers and acquisitions through my growing network of shell companies. By the time Sophie graduated from Harvard Law, I owned controlling interests in 7 major law firms across the East Coast. My company, Mitchell Strategic Solutions, had become the invisible force behind some of the most successful legal practices in the country. But on paper, I was just the quiet daughter who hadn't found her path yet. Everything changed the day Sophia joined Preston and Hayes, one of Boston's most prestigious law firms. She didn't know that 6 months earlier, I had acquired it through a complex series of transactions. She walked into her first day of work, proud and confident, not realizing that her little sister was technically her boss. "You should see my office, Alex," she gloated during a family dinner. "Corner suite, full staff, partner track within 5 years. What are you doing these days? Still with that little consulting business?" I smiled and took a sip of wine. Something like that. The truth was, I was in the middle of the biggest acquisition of my career. Preston and Hayes was just the beginning. I was positioning myself to take over Blackwood International, the largest law firm conglomerate on the East Coast. The deal would make me one of the most powerful figures in the legal world, all before my 25th birthday. But Sophia couldn't help herself. She had to maintain her position as the family success story. That's why, when I met James Walker at a charity gala, she tried to stake her claim. "He's from one of Boston's oldest families," she told our mother, loud enough for me to hear. "And he's looking for someone successful, accomplished. Not really your scene, Alex." What Safia didn't know was that James had met me 3 months earlier in my role as the CEO of Mitchell Strategic Solutions. He had been representing Blackwood International in the acquisition negotiations, not realizing that the powerful, elusive CEO he was dealing with was the same woman he was falling in love with. When James proposed 6 months later, Safia was livid. She had been dropping hints about her own interest in him, only to watch her underachieving sister snag one of Boston's most eligible bachelors. "It doesn't make sense," I overheard her telling our mother. "She's nobody in this city. She barely has a real job. Something's not right about this." The wedding planning became her obsession. She insisted on being my maid of honor, not out of sisterly love, but because it gave her access to every detail, every guest list, every moment she could use to dig into my life. What she discovered must have shocked her: the inconsistencies in my story, the mysterious meetings, the connections that someone with a little consulting business shouldn't have. She spent months gathering evidence, planning her moment of triumph. She chose our wedding day to spring her trap, not realizing she was walking into one of her own. The ceremony was perfect. Boston's historic Trinity Church filled with the city's elite, judges, lawyers, business leaders. Many of them were there for James, the respected attorney from an old Boston family. None of them knew that the bride owned most of their law firms. But as the minister asked if anyone objected to the union, Safia rose from her seat beside me, a wicked smile playing on her lips. Little did she know, I had been waiting for this moment. After all, some sisters aren't meant to be best friends. They're meant to be lessons in humility. If anyone knows any reason why these two should not be joined in matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace. Those traditional words hung in the air of Trinity Church for just a moment before Safia stood up, her blue maid of honor dress rustling as she stepped forward. The smirk on her face told me she had been waiting for this moment. "Actually," she announced, her voice carrying through the stunned silence, "I have something to say." Our mother gasped. James squeezed my hand, but I remained calm. After all, I had prepared for this possibility. "Before we continue this farce," Safia declared, pulling out a folder from behind her bouquet, "everyone here deserves to know the truth about Alexander Mitchell." She opened the folder with dramatic flair. "My sister has been lying to all of you. She's not the simple business consultant she claims to be. She's been operating under false pretenses, infiltrating law firms, manipulating her way into business deals." Murmurs rippled through the church. In the front row, our father's face had turned red with embarrassment. Our mother looked like she might faint. "I have proof," Safia continued, clearly enjoying herself. "Bank records showing suspicious transactions. Shell companies leading back to her. She's been deceiving everyone, including her fiancé." She turned to James. "Did you know your bride isn't who she claims to be? That while you've been working on the Blackwood International acquisition, she's been orchestrating it?" I finished for her, my voice calm. Safia faltered for a moment, but pressed on. "She's not qualified to run any of these companies. She never even went to law school." "You're right," I said, standing up in my wedding dress. "I never went to law school." I pulled out my phone and opened an email. I was too busy building an empire. With one tap, I sent the email I had prepared. Throughout the church, phones began buzzing as Boston's legal elite received the notification. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, "as of this moment, Mitchell Strategic Solutions has completed its acquisition of Blackwood International. This merger makes us the largest legal services corporation in New England." Safia's face had gone pale. What are you talking about? I smiled. You're right about one thing, Safia. I'm not a lawyer. I own the law firms, including Preston and Hayes, where you've been working for the past year. The folder slipped from her hands, papers scattering across the church floor. That's impossible. You're lying. Am I? I turned to the assembled guests. Judge Harrison, would you like to confirm who owns controlling interest in your firm? Or perhaps Mr. Blackwood himself would care to explain who he's been negotiating with for the past 6 months. William Blackwood stood up from his pew. Everything she says is true. Alexandra Mitchell is the CEO of Mitchell Strategic Solutions. She's been the driving force behind the most significant legal industry consolidation in Boston's history. Sophia staggered backward. But you're my little sister. The underachiever. The disappointment. The disappointment who now owns the company where you work. I corrected her. Speaking of which, we should discuss your recent performance reviews. They're not very impressive. Our mother had found her voice. Alexandra, why didn't you tell us? Would you have believed me? I asked. You were too busy comparing me to Safia's Harvard degree to notice I was building something bigger than any law school could teach. I turned back to my sister. By the way, since you're so interested in exposing secrets, should we discuss what really happened with the Anderson case last month? The one where you claimed full credit for the settlement. Sophia's face went from pale to ashen. You wouldn't. The actual case files show that you barely contributed, I continued. In fact, your primary contribution was taking credit for work done by your junior associates, something that's become a pattern in your career. That's not true, she protested weakly. The records indicate otherwise, as do the complaints filed by your team, which have been sitting in HR, complaints I now own, by the way. James stepped forward, taking my hand. He was smiling. I should mention, he added, that as chief counsel for Blackwood International, I've known exactly who Alexandra is from the beginning. We met during the initial merger negotiations, long before that charity gala where you tried to warn me about her. Sophia looked around desperately, but she found no allies in the crowd. The city's most powerful legal minds were all nodding in recognition. They had all dealt with Mitchell Strategic Solutions, even if they hadn't known the owner's identity until now. So, I said, straightening my wedding dress, would you like to continue exposing secrets, dear sister? Or shall we proceed with my wedding? Sophia stood frozen, her carefully planned moment of triumph transformed into her own public humiliation. Finally, she managed to whisper, Why didn't you ever tell me? You never asked, I replied simply. You were too busy looking down at me to notice I had risen above you. I turned to the minister. Shall we continue? But Sophia wasn't quite finished. As she sank back into her seat, she muttered just loud enough for me to hear, This isn't over. I caught her eye and smiled. Actually, it is. Check your email. As if on cue, her phone buzzed. Her eyes widened as she read the message. An official notice of her immediate termination from Preston and Hayes, effective that moment. You can't fire me, she hissed. I'm not firing you, I corrected her. The evidence of your misconduct and credit theft is firing you. I'm just the owner who approved the termination. The minister cleared his throat, clearly unsure how to proceed after such drama, but I simply nodded for him to continue. After all, this was still my wedding day, even if it had turned into something more. As I stood there, preparing to say my vows, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in one of the church's stained glass windows. I saw not the quiet, overlooked younger sister, but the powerful woman I had become. the woman who had built an empire while others underestimated her. And as I looked at Sophia, now sitting humiliated in her maid of honor dress, I realized that sometimes the best revenge isn't just success. It's success that no one saw coming. The ceremony continued, but the atmosphere had shifted. This was no longer just a wedding. It was a coronation. My parents sat in stunned silence, processing the revelation that their underachieving daughter was actually one of the most powerful people in the room. As I said, "I do," I couldn't help but think how fitting it was that my wedding day had become the day I finally stepped out of the shadows. After all, what better way to start a new life than by revealing your true power? But even as I celebrated, I knew this was just the beginning. Sophia's words, "This isn't over," echoed in my mind. She had always been competitive, vindictive. She wouldn't take this humiliation lying down. What she didn't realize was that I was counting on that. The reception at the Boston Harbor Hotel should have been the perfect celebration. Instead, it became the battlefield for the next phase of Sophia's war against me. I was barely through my first dance with James when my phone buzzed with urgent messages. Sophia had gone straight from the church to the media, attempting to spin a story about corporate espionage and illegal business practices. Mitchell Strategic Solutions built through deception. Read the headline she had somehow managed to plant in an online business journal. Harvard graduate exposes sister's fraudulent empire. I smiled, showing the article to James. He raised an eyebrow. She really doesn't know when to quit, does she? No, I replied. She doesn't. But I was ready for this too. I nodded to Catherine, my chief of operations, who had been waiting discreetly by the bar. She immediately began making calls. Within an hour, every major news outlet in Boston received a comprehensive press package detailing Mitchell Strategic Solutions' completely legal rise to power, including all regulatory filings and compliance records. But Sophia wasn't done. As guests mingled over champagne and hors d'oeuvres, she made her way through the crowd, whispering to key figures in Boston's legal community. "Did you know she's been recording your private conversations?" I overheard her telling Judge Harrison. Every law firm she acquired, she gathered dirt on the partners first. What she didn't realize was that each person she approached had already received a message from me, warning them about her desperate attempts to salvage her reputation. The breaking point came when she approached William Blackwood himself. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, her voice carrying just enough to draw attention, "I have evidence that my sister blackmailed you into this merger. She threatened to expose your offshore accounts." The room fell silent. Blackwood looked at her for a long moment, then laughed. "Miss Mitchell, or should I say, former Attorney Mitchell, your sister never blackmailed me. In fact, she was the one who helped me legitimize those accounts last year, saving my company millions in potential fines. That's why I agreed to the merger." Sophia's face turned red. But the documents I found were decoys," I interrupted, walking over. "I knew you were searching my office at Preston and Hayes. Every secret document you discovered was placed there specifically for you to find." "That's impossible," she stammered. "The banking records, the shell companies, all legal, all traceable, all part of legitimate business operations," I explained calmly. "Did you really think I wouldn't protect myself against exactly this kind of attack?" Our parents, who had been watching this exchange with increasing discomfort, finally approached. "Sophia," our father said, his voice heavy with disappointment, "enough." But she wasn't finished. She pulled out her phone, hands shaking. "I still have proof. Recordings of your meetings, documents I copied. Actually, James interjected, you don't. As chief counsel of Blackwood International, I should inform you that removing confidential documents from Preston and Hayes constitutes a serious breach of contract, not to mention a violation of the Bar Association's ethics code. Sophia's face went pale. You wouldn't dare report me to the bar. I don't have to, I said softly. Your own actions today, attempting to disrupt a legal merger with false allegations, stealing confidential documents, trying to manipulate the media, those actions require me to report you. As the owner of Preston and Hayes, I have a legal obligation to do so. You're bluffing, she whispered, but her voice trembled. I pulled out my own phone and showed her the screen. A formal complaint to the Massachusetts Bar Association, ready to be filed. Last chance, Sophia. Walk away now. Leave Boston. Take the severance package I'm still willing to offer and start fresh somewhere else. You're destroying my career, she protested. No, our mother suddenly spoke up. You did that yourself. All these years, you were so busy proving you were better than Alexandra that you never noticed she had actually become better than you. Sophia looked around the room, finally seeing the truth. The powerful people she had tried to turn against me were all nodding in agreement. Her attempted power play had backfired completely. Fine, she spat. You win. You've always been playing a longer game than me, haven't you? The difference is, I was playing to win, I replied. You were just playing to make me lose. She turned and walked out of the reception, her blue dress disappearing into the Boston night. As the door closed behind her, I felt a strange mix of triumph and sadness. Are you okay? James asked softly. I squeezed his hand. I am. It needed to end this way. Our parents approached, looking shell-shocked but proud. We had no idea, my father said. All these years. You saw what you expected to see, I replied. Sophia was the star. I was the disappointment. It made it easier to build something extraordinary while everyone was looking the other way. The rest of the reception passed in a blur of congratulations and celebrations. But now people were celebrating more than just my marriage. They were celebrating the emergence of a new power in Boston's legal world. Later that night, as James and I prepared to leave for our honeymoon, I received one final email from Sophia. You've won, she wrote. I'm moving to Chicago. But remember this, you taught me that appearances can be deceiving. One day, when you least expect it, I'll have built something of my own, and then we'll see who the real winner is. I showed the email to James. He looked concerned, but I just smiled. Let her try, I said. Building something real takes more than ambition and revenge. It takes patience, strategy, and the wisdom to know that true success isn't about beating others. It's about becoming the best version of yourself. 10 years later, I stood in my office at the top of the Mitchell Blackwood Tower, looking out over Boston's skyline. The empire I had built had grown beyond even my expectations. Sophia had tried to start several ventures in Chicago, but each had failed because she was still focused on competing with me, rather than creating something meaningful. Our parents had finally learned to see me for who I was, not who they had assumed I would be. And James had become not just my husband, but my true partner, in business and in life. On my desk sat a framed photo from our wedding, the moment right after I revealed the truth about Mitchell Strategic Solutions. In it, I'm standing tall in my wedding dress, power and confidence radiating from my posture. Sophia is in the background, her face a mask of shocked realization. It serves as a reminder that sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one you should watch most carefully. Because while some people spend their lives trying to prove their worth through words and showmanship, others build empires in silence. My phone buzzed. Another major law firm was ready to join our network. As I prepared for the meeting, I thought about how far I'd come from that overlooked younger sister. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just success. It's success so complete that it transcends revenge altogether. And sometimes the greatest triumph isn't in proving others wrong, but in proving yourself right. The empire I built wasn't just about showing up my sister or proving my worth to my parents. It was about creating something lasting, something meaningful, something that would outlive any family drama or personal vendetta. And as I sat down to sign the papers that would further expand my business empire, I couldn't help but smile. Because in the end, the quiet sister had roared the loudest, not through words, but through actions. Not through competition, but through creation. That's the thing about true power. It doesn't need to announce itself. It simply is. And that's a lesson Sophia never learned. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and for 15 years, I poured my heart and soul into building Harrison Enterprises from a modest tech company into an industry powerhouse. When I started as a junior software developer, fresh out of college, old Mr. Harrison saw something in me that others missed. While most saw a quiet girl from a small town in Ohio, he recognized raw talent and determination. "You remind me of myself when I was younger," he told me during my first performance review. "Always thinking 3 steps ahead, always seeing possibilities others miss." Those words became my anchor through countless late nights, debugging code, marathon project meetings, and endless client presentations. Year after year, I climbed the ranks, from developer to team lead, then to project manager, and finally to chief technology officer. Every promotion was earned through sweat, innovation, and an unwavering dedication to the company's success. Under my leadership, our software division transformed from a struggling department into the company's main revenue generator. I pioneered our shift to cloud computing before our competitors even understood its potential. My team developed the proprietary algorithms that would eventually become our flagship product, Harrison Cloud. But everything changed when old Mr. Harrison had his stroke. I remember that day clearly. I was in the middle of a client meeting when my assistant burst in, face pale. "Mr. Harrison, hospital. It's serious." The next few weeks were a blur of hospital visits, emergency board meetings, and desperate attempts to keep the company running smoothly while our founder and CEO fought for his life. Then came Marcus Harrison, the prodigal son, rushing back from his extended finding himself tour of Europe to take the reins of his father's company. I had met Marcus a few times over the years, usually at company holiday parties where he'd make brief appearances before disappearing to whatever exotic location caught his fancy that month. From day one, Marcus made it clear he had different plans for Harrison Enterprises. "We need to modernize," he declared in his first board meeting, dismissing 15 years of steady growth and innovation with a wave of his manicured hand. "Everything's so old-fashioned here." I tried to be diplomatic. "Perhaps we should review the company's current trajectory and success metrics before making any drastic changes," I suggested, sliding over a folder containing our latest quarterly reports. Our cloud division alone has seen 300% growth in the past 2 years. Marcus didn't even glance at the numbers. "That's exactly what I'm talking about," he scoffed. "Cloud computing? That's yesterday's news. We need to be in blockchain, NFTs, the metaverse." Over the next 6 months, I watched in horror as Marcus systematically dismantled everything we had built. He hired a parade of flashy consultants, each with their own revolutionary vision for the company. Long-standing client relationships were neglected in favor of chasing trending tech buzzwords. Valuable team members were pushed out, replaced by Marcus's former classmates from business school. Through it all, I tried to maintain stability in my department. I worked double shifts to keep our core products running smoothly while simultaneously trying to implement Marcus's latest visionary directives. But I could see the writing on the wall. The final confrontation came on a rainy Tuesday morning. I had just finished a presentation showing how Marcus's latest initiative, a luxury NFT marketplace for digital yacht ownership, had burned through millions in development costs without generating any revenue. "These numbers can't be right," Marcus snapped, his designer suit creasing as he leaned forward aggressively. "You're just too stuck in your old ways to see the potential." "The numbers don't lie, Marcus," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "We've lost 3 major clients this quarter alone. If we don't course correct." "Course correct?" He cut me off, standing up so abruptly his chair toppled backward. "The only thing that needs correcting is you. You're the problem here, Sarah. You and your outdated thinking are holding this company back." I maintained my composure, even as I felt 15 years of dedication being crushed under the weight of his contempt. "I've given everything to this company, Marcus. Your father—" "My father isn't here anymore," he shouted, face reddening. "This is my company now, and I don't need some small-town nobody telling me how to run it. You're fired. Get out." The office fell silent. Dozens of faces turned away, pretending not to witness my humiliation. I slowly gathered my things, my mind already racing ahead to what needed to be done next. As I reached the door, Marcus couldn't resist one final jab. "Good luck finding another job at your age. Maybe try something more your speed, like teaching basic computer skills at the local library." I turned back, meeting his smug gaze with a calm smile that seemed to unnerve him slightly. "Thank you for the suggestion, Marcus, but I already have something lined up." What Marcus didn't know, what none of them knew, was that 5 years ago, I had started my own company on the side. Atlas Industries began as a small consulting firm, leveraging my expertise in cloud computing to help other companies modernize their infrastructure. While Harrison Enterprises had my loyalty during business hours, my nights and weekends were devoted to building something of my own. Those basic computer skills, Marcus mocked, had attracted an impressive client roster. Under the guidance of my carefully chosen CEO, who served as the public face of the company while I remained a silent owner, Atlas Industries had grown into one of the most respected names in enterprise cloud solutions. And tomorrow morning, Harrison Enterprises would be desperately pitching their services to Atlas Industries, unaware that the worthless employee they had just fired was actually the owner of the company they were trying to impress. As I drove home that evening, my phone buzzed with a message from my Atlas Industries CEO. "Everything's set for tomorrow's meeting. You sure you want to handle this personally?" I smiled, thinking of Marcus's smug face and what it would look like when he realized the truth. "Absolutely," I replied. "I wouldn't miss this for the world." The Atlas Industries headquarters occupied the entire top floor of the city's most prestigious office building. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered breathtaking views of the skyline, while the minimalist decor spoke of quiet confidence rather than flashy excess. I stood in my private elevator, watching floor numbers tick upward, mentally preparing myself for what was about to unfold. "Good morning, Ms. Mitchell." My assistant Emma greeted me as I stepped out. After 5 years, she was one of the few who knew both sides of my life. The silent owner of Atlas Industries and the now former CTO of Harrison Enterprises. The Harrison team arrived 15 minutes ago. Mr. Marcus Harrison is quite vocal about the wait. I smiled, adjusting my tailored blazer. Gone was the intentionally understated wardrobe I'd worn at Harrison Enterprises. Today, I dressed the part of a CEO who could make or break a company's future. How long have they been waiting? 20 minutes, Emma replied, a hint of amusement in her voice. Mr. Harrison has mentioned his important position approximately 7 times. Well, I checked my reflection in the brushed steel walls. Let's not keep them waiting any longer. The main conference room fell silent as I entered. Marcus stood at the head of the table, mid-rant about the disrespect of being kept waiting. His new VP of sales, Derek, a former fraternity brother he'd hired to replace our veteran sales director, sat nearby, fumbling with presentation materials. Several board members, including Thomas Chen, who'd always supported Marcus despite his reckless decisions, occupied the other seats. Finally, Marcus exclaimed, not bothering to hide his irritation, "Do you have any idea who we—" His voice died in his throat as I walked to the head of the table. The color drained from his face so quickly, I thought he might faint. "Sarah?" He choked out my name like it physically pained him. "Good morning, gentlemen." I kept my voice professional, setting my briefcase down with a quiet click that seemed to echo in the stunned silence. "I apologize for the delay. Shall we begin discussing Harrison Enterprises' proposal to Atlas Industries?" Derek dropped his presentation remote. Thomas Chen's mouth opened and closed without producing sound. But Marcus looked like he'd seen a ghost. This is impossible," he stammered. "You can't be. Where is Richard Stone? We're supposed to meet with the CEO of Atlas Industries." I sat down, nodding to Emma, who began distributing folders. "Richard Stone is an excellent CEO, but he reports to me. I'm Sarah Mitchell, founder and owner of Atlas Industries." I paused, enjoying the way Marcus seemed to shrink with each word. "Though you might remember me better as the small-town nobody you fired yesterday." The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus had gone from pale to ashen, his designer suit suddenly seeming like an ill-fitting costume. Derek was frantically flipping through the documents Emma had distributed, his sales bravado completely evaporated. "This isn't possible," Marcus repeated weakly. "Atlas Industries is $1 billion company. $1.7 billion as of last quarter's valuation," I corrected him. "Though I suppose someone stuck in their old ways like me shouldn't brag about numbers." Thomas Chen found his voice first. "Sarah, all these years, while you were our CTO, I built Atlas Industries in my spare time," I confirmed. "Nights, weekends, vacation days, all while giving Harrison Enterprises my absolute best during working hours. Unlike some." I glanced at Marcus. "I understand the value of hard work and loyalty." Marcus's face flushed red. "If you own Atlas, why did you stay at Harrison Enterprises? Why work for us at all?" "Because your father believed in me," I said simply. "He gave me a chance when no one else would. I wanted to honor that trust, help build his legacy." I stood up, walking slowly around the table. "But you, Marcus, you took that legacy and treated it like a toy. You pushed out valuable employees, alienated loyal clients, and chased trending buzzwords instead of building sustainable growth." I stopped beside Marcus's chair. "Yesterday, you told me to try teaching basic computer skills. Today, you're here because Harrison Enterprises is bleeding clients, burning through cash, and desperately needs Atlas Industries' help to survive. Ironic, isn't it?" Marcus slumped in his chair, the full weight of his mistake finally hitting him. The client meetings you handled, the relationships you built, they're all moving to Atlas now, aren't they? I returned to my seat, opening one of the folders Emma had distributed. Not all of them. Only the ones who recognize the value of working with a company that puts their needs first. By my last count, that's about 60% of Harrison's major clients. You can't do this, Marcus protested, but his voice lacked conviction. It's not fair. Fair? I raised an eyebrow. Like how you treated the employees who built your father's company. Like how you dismissed 15 years of my dedication because you thought I was beneath you. I pulled out a document and slid it across the table. Here's what's going to happen. Atlas Industries is prepared to acquire Harrison Enterprises. The terms are non-negotiable. You can either accept our offer or watch as your father's company continues its decline under your leadership. You want to buy us out? Thomas Chen asked, already reaching for the document. Not quite, I corrected him. Atlas Industries will assume control of operations. Marcus will step down as CEO, effective immediately. The board will be restructured, and the company will return to the principles that made it successful under Mr. Harrison's leadership. Marcus shot to his feet, his chair clattering backward. You can't do this. I won't let you. Marcus, Thomas Chen cut him off sharply. Sit down and be quiet. You've done enough damage. He turned to me, his expression grave. The terms of this offer, they're more generous than we deserve. I'm not doing this for revenge, I said quietly. Your father built something meaningful, Marcus. Something that provided jobs, supported families, created real value in the world. I won't let you destroy that because of your ego. The next hour passed in a blur of signatures and legal requirements. Marcus sat in stunned silence as his authority was stripped away piece by piece. When it was done, when Harrison Enterprises officially became a subsidiary of Atlas Industries, I stood to conclude the meeting. One last thing, I said, looking directly at Marcus. Clear out your office by the end of the day. Emma will show you out. As they filed out of the conference room, I heard Derek mutter to Marcus, Dude, you fired the wrong person. Standing at the window, watching the city spread out below, I felt no satisfaction in Marcus's humiliation. This wasn't about revenge. It was about protecting what his father had built, about ensuring that good people didn't suffer because of one man's arrogance. Emma appeared at my side with a coffee. Was it worth it? Keeping Atlas a secret all these years. I thought about old Mr. Harrison, still recovering in his hospital bed. I thought about the employees at Harrison Enterprises who could now stop worrying about their jobs. I thought about the clients who would continue receiving the quality service they deserved. It wasn't about keeping secrets, I said finally. It was about building something meaningful, something that could make a difference when it really mattered. Little did I know, this was just the beginning. Marcus might have been defeated, but he wasn't done fighting, and what he did next would force me to defend not just Harrison Enterprises, but everything I had built. Marcus Harrison might have lost control of his company, but wounded pride can be dangerous. I should have known he wouldn't accept defeat gracefully. The first attack came 3 days after the acquisition. I was reviewing quarterly projections when Emma burst into my office, her usual composure shattered. Sarah, you need to see this. She handed me her tablet, open to a major tech news website. The headline made my blood run cold. Atlas Industries, ACQUI, of Harrison Enterprises, Andrnvestigati, for INSIDER Trading. The article, citing anonymous sources close to the situation, suggested I had used my position as CTO to manipulate Harrison Enterprises' value, making it vulnerable to Atlas's takeover. It was a clever angle, one that played perfectly into Marcus's narrative of betrayal. "Get our legal team on this immediately," I told Emma, already reaching for my phone, "and set up a meeting with the board for." My phone buzzed with an incoming call. Thomas Chen. "Sarah." His voice was tight with concern. "Have you seen the article?" "Yes. Marcus's handiwork, I assume." "He's not just throwing accusations around," Thomas warned. "He's filed formal complaints with the SEC. He's claiming you deliberately sabotaged projects, drove away clients, all to devalue the company for Atlas's benefit." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. The same projects he ordered us to abandon, the same clients he alienated with his visionary pivots. "You and I know that, but perception matters. The market is already reacting." He was right. By afternoon, Atlas's stock had dropped 12%. Several major clients put their contracts on hold, waiting to see how the scandal would play out. Marcus had found the perfect way to hurt me, by threatening everything I'd built. But he'd forgotten one crucial detail. I had receipts. Lots of them. I spent the next week working with our legal team, compiling evidence. Every project Marcus had killed, every client relationship he'd damaged, every reckless decision, all meticulously documented. Emails, meeting recordings, financial reports, a perfect paper trail of his mismanagement. Then came the counterattack. "Ladies and gentlemen," I addressed the hastily assembled press conference, cameras flashing as I took the podium. "Recent allegations have been made about the circumstances surrounding Atlas Industries' acquisition of Harrison Enterprises. Today, I'm releasing all documentation related to that acquisition, including evidence that tells the real story." One by one, I laid out the facts. Marcus's decision to abandon profitable product lines for speculative ventures, the mass exodus of experienced employees, the millions wasted on his NFT marketplace and other failed initiatives, each point backed by irrefutable evidence. Furthermore, I continued, I'm announcing that Atlas Industries will be establishing the Harrison Innovation Fund, a $50 million investment in emerging technology companies. This fund will honor the legacy of James Harrison, focusing on the principles of sustainable growth and genuine innovation that he championed. The reaction was immediate. Atlas's stock rebounded. Clients who had wavered reached out to reaffirm their commitment. But the most significant response came from an unexpected source. 2 days after the press conference, I received a call from the hospital. Old Mr. Harrison wanted to see me. He was sitting up in bed when I arrived, looking frailer than I remembered, but with the same sharp intelligence in his eyes. A newspaper lay on his lap, open to an article about the Harrison Innovation Fund. "Sit down, Sarah," he said, gesturing to the chair beside his bed. "Tell me everything." So I did. I told him about building Atlas Industries, about trying to protect his legacy, about Marcus's attacks, and how I defended against them. He listened in silence, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I always knew Marcus wasn't ready," he said softly. "I tried to teach him that success isn't about quick wins or flashy moves. It's about building something that lasts." He looked at me, a hint of his old smile returning. "You understood that, didn't you?" "I had a good teacher," I replied, feeling tears prick at my eyes. He reached for my hand, his grip surprisingly strong. the Innovation Fund, using my name for that. Thank you. It's your legacy, I said simply. It should help build more success stories. The next morning, Marcus made his final move. He called a press conference of his own, clearly planning another attack. But before he could speak, his father was wheeled onto the stage. James Harrison took the microphone, his voice weak but clear. I've watched recent events with great interest. My son claims his company was stolen from him. He's wrong. Harrison Enterprises wasn't stolen, it was saved. Saved by someone who understood its true value, who protected its legacy when others would have squandered it. The room erupted in camera flashes as Marcus stood frozen, watching his last attempt at revenge crumble. Sarah Mitchell, Mr. Harrison continued, has my full support and gratitude. The Harrison Innovation Fund she established proves what I've always known. She understands that true success isn't measured by quarterly profits or trending technologies, but by the positive impact we create in the world. Marcus left the stage without a word. It was the last time I saw him in person, though I heard he started a cryptocurrency venture in Miami that failed within 6 months. 1 year later, I stood in the newly renovated Harrison Enterprises lobby, now a division of Atlas Industries. The building had been modernized, but we kept the core elements that made it special, including the wall of employee photos that Mr. Harrison had always maintained. Ms. Mitchell? A young developer approached, clutching a laptop. I had some ideas about improving our cloud infrastructure, if you have time to look. I smiled, remembering another young developer who'd once nervously pitched ideas to a CEO who took the time to listen. Of course. Let's hear what you've got. The Harrison Innovation Fund has since helped launch dozens of successful startups. Old Mr. Harrison serves on its advisory board. His health improved enough for part-time work. And me, I still keep my old Harrison Enterprises ID badge in my desk drawer, not as a reminder of Marcus's humiliation, but as a reminder that success isn't about revenge or proving others wrong. It's about building something meaningful, something that outlasts personal victories or defeats. Sometimes the best response to those who underestimate you isn't to prove them wrong immediately. It's to build something so significant that when they finally realize their mistake, it doesn't matter anymore. As for that small-town nobody, Marcus once mocked, she now runs a technology empire worth billions. But more importantly, she's creating opportunities for other nobodies to prove their worth, just as old Mr. Harrison once did for her. Because in the end, that's what real success looks like, not tearing others down, but building others up. And that's a legacy worth protecting. My name is Olivia Blackwood, and I always thought my family's wealth came from generations of smart real estate investments. That's what the plaque in our mansion's foyer proclaimed. Blackwood Properties, established 1892. That's what my parents told me at every family dinner. That's what everyone in our affluent circle believed. But they were all wrong. The truth began to unravel the day I decided to renovate our family mansion. At 32, I had finally convinced my parents to let me modernize the aging Victorian estate. They agreed reluctantly, with one strange condition: the basement was strictly off limits. The foundation is delicate, my mother insisted, her usually confident voice wavering slightly. Any disturbance could compromise the entire structure. I should have noticed how her hands trembled when she said this, how my father's face turned ashen at the mere mention of renovation. But I was too excited about finally bringing the mansion into the 21st century to pay attention to these warning signs. The first few weeks of renovation went smoothly. We updated the kitchen, restored the grand staircase, and modernized the electrical systems. Everything was going according to plan until Marcus, my lead contractor, discovered something odd behind the wine cellar walls. "Miss Blackwood," he called one afternoon, his voice echoing through the empty halls. "You might want to see this." I followed him down to the wine cellar, where his team had been installing new temperature control systems. They had removed some of the old wooden panels, revealing something that made my blood run cold: a door. Not just any door, but a heavy iron door with an intricate locking mechanism, carefully hidden behind decades of careful carpentry. "This isn't on any of the building plans," Marcus said, shining his flashlight on the rusted hinges. "And look at this craftsmanship. This was built to last, to keep something in or out." I reached out to touch the cold metal, my fingers tracing the elaborate engravings on its surface. They formed a pattern I recognized, the same pattern that appeared on my great-grandfather's signet ring, the one my father still wore every day. "Can you open it?" I asked, my curiosity overshadowing the echo of my mother's warnings. Marcus examined the lock. "It's old, but not complicated. Give me a few minutes." The sound of his tools working on the lock seemed to grow louder in the confined space. Each click and scrape sent shivers down my spine. Finally, with a loud groan, the door swung open. The beam of Marcus's flashlight revealed a narrow corridor stretching into darkness. The air that rushed out was stale, carrying with it the musty smell of secrets long buried. "I'll go first," I said, taking the flashlight from Marcus's hand. "Wait here." The corridor was longer than I expected, its walls lined with shelves holding leather-bound ledgers and stacked papers. At the end stood a massive oak desk, its surface covered in dust, except for one spot, a fresh handprint. Someone had been here recently. My hands trembling, I picked up the nearest ledger. Its pages were filled with neat columns of numbers and names, dates stretching back to the 1890s. As I read, my eyes widened in horror. These weren't real estate transactions. They were something else entirely. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. Before I could turn, a familiar voice spoke. "I told you not to come down here, Olivia." I spun around to face my father, barely recognizing the man illuminated by my flashlight. His usually warm eyes were cold, his face set in grim determination. In his hand, he clutched a small key, the same key I had seen him wearing on a chain around his neck since I was a child. "Dad," I whispered, clutching the ledger to my chest. "What is all this?" He stepped forward, his shadow looming large on the corridor walls. "Put the book down, Olivia. Some secrets should stay buried." But it was too late. I had already seen enough to understand that everything I knew about my family was a lie. The Blackwood fortune wasn't built on real estate at all. It was built on something much darker, something that explained why certain families in our city had mysteriously disappeared over the years, why our basement was always off limits, and why my great-grandfather's portrait seemed to watch us with such sinister satisfaction. I took a step back, bumping into the old desk. "Dad, these records, these names—" "You don't understand," he said, advancing slowly. "Everything we did for the family, for our legacy." Behind him, I heard more footsteps. My mother appeared in the doorway, her face pale in the dim light. "Harrison," she called to my father, her voice urgent. "She needs to know. It's time." My father stopped, his shoulders sagging slightly. "She's not ready." "I wasn't ready either," my mother replied. "But the legacy must continue. And now that she's found this place—" She gestured to the room full of dark secrets. "She needs to understand her inheritance." I looked between them. These people I thought I knew so well, suddenly strangers in the shadows of our family's true history. The ledger in my hands felt heavy with the weight of generations of secrets. And as my parents began to tell me the truth about the Blackwood legacy, I realized that the renovation of our old mansion had uncovered more than just hidden rooms and forgotten doorways. It had uncovered the dark foundation upon which our entire family fortune was built, a foundation that would soon force me to make an impossible choice between preserving my family's legacy and saving my own soul. The basement air grew colder as my parents led me deeper into the hidden corridor. My father's signet ring gleamed in the flashlight beam as he pulled out another leather-bound book from the shelves. The Blackwood legacy began in 1892. He started, his voice taking on a tone I'd never heard before. Your great-grandfather, Edmund Blackwood, wasn't just a real estate developer. He was what you might call a collector of debts. He opened the book, revealing pages of names, dates, and amounts. But these weren't ordinary loans. Each entry ended with the same chilling note: property acquired through complete forfeiture. I don't understand, I said, though a horrible suspicion was beginning to form. My mother's hand touched my shoulder. Edmund discovered something powerful during the economic crisis of the 1890s. People would do anything to save their homes, their businesses, their families. Anything? My voice trembled. He offered them contracts, my father continued. Magical contracts, bound by blood and ancient rituals. They would receive whatever they desperately needed: money, power, success. In return, they pledged something far more valuable than mere property: their souls. I whispered, the words feeling ridiculous even as they left my mouth. But my parents didn't laugh. Not exactly, my mother said. Their fate, their future, everything they could or would become. When the contract came due, they simply disappeared. Their properties, their wealth, everything transferred to the Blackwood family. I stared at the ledger, understanding now why certain names seemed familiar. They were prominent families who had mysteriously vanished over the years, their disappearances written off as accidents or unexplained tragedies. The contracts, my father explained, were designed by Edmund using knowledge he gained from certain entities, beings that exist in the spaces between what's real and what's not. They ensure the terms are met, one way or another. My mother pulled out another book, this one newer. The business evolved over time. We became more selective, more discreet. Instead of targeting desperate families, we focused on ambitious individuals, people who would trade anything for success. Like the Harringtons last year, I remembered suddenly. They won the state lottery, became overnight millionaires. Then their private plane crashed 6 months later. They knew the terms, my father said coldly. 6 months of wealth and success, then complete forfeiture. Everything they gained, everything they were, became part of the Blackwood fortune. This is insane. I backed away from them. You're telling me our entire family fortune is built on stealing people's lives, their futures? Building, my mother corrected. Present tense. The contracts are still active. In fact, she hesitated, glancing at my father. There's one being negotiated right now. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. A text from Marcus, my contractor. Miss Blackwood, there's someone here to see you about the renovation budget. Says it's urgent. My blood ran cold. The renovation costs, I said slowly. They're higher than expected. You knew I'd need more funding. My father nodded. We arranged for someone to offer help. Someone desperate enough to sign a new contract. No. I shook my head. I won't be part of this. You already are, my mother said firmly. You're a Blackwood. The legacy passes to you now. You must learn to manage the contracts to maintain the family business. And if I refuse, my father's expression darkened. You can't. The moment you entered this room, you became bound to the legacy. The entities that enforce our contracts. They're aware of you now. I looked around the room, suddenly feeling watched by something beyond the shadows. The air seemed to thicken, and in the corners of my vision, I caught glimpses of movement that shouldn't be possible. There's more, my mother added. The contracts require active management. If the Blackwood line fails to maintain them, she shuddered. Let's just say the entities would claim everything, including us. I sank into the old desk chair, my mind reeling. How many? I asked. How many active contracts are there? My father pulled out a modern laptop, incongruous in this ancient space. Currently, 47, each with different terms, different due dates. They need to be monitored, managed. New ones need to be created to maintain the balance. The contractor upstairs, I realized. He would be number 48. If you approve the contract, my mother nodded. It's your decision now. Your first test as the new keeper of the Blackwood legacy. My phone buzzed again. Marcus, Miss Blackwood? He's getting impatient. I stared at the message, understanding now that I stood at a crossroads. I could run, try to escape this dark inheritance, but my parents' warnings about the consequences rang in my ears. Or I could embrace it, become what generations of Blackwoods had been, collectors of fates, dealers in futures. Standing up, I straightened my jacket and took a deep breath. I need to see all the contracts, every detail. If I'm going to be responsible for this, I need to understand everything. My parents exchanged relieved looks. Of course, my father said, moving toward a modern filing cabinet hidden in the shadows. But first, you need to deal with the situation upstairs. I walked toward the door, then paused. Just tell me one thing. When you paid for my college education, for my first apartment, for everything, whose fate paid for it? The silence that followed was deafening. The Middletons, my mother finally answered. Remember them? The family that owned the bakery downtown. I did remember. They had vanished during my freshman year of college. Their bakery, their home, everything they owned had been mysteriously abandoned overnight. As I climbed the stairs back to the main house, each step felt heavier than the last. Upstairs, a desperate person waited, ready to trade their future for immediate success. And I had to decide whether to continue my family's dark legacy or find another way, if another way even existed. What I didn't know then was that my decision would set in motion a chain of events that would either secure the Blackwood fortune forever or destroy everything my family had built over the past century. I pushed open the basement door, stepping back into the world of light and normalcy. But now I understood. Our mansion wasn't just a symbol of wealth and success. It was a repository of stolen fates, a fortress built on disappeared lives. And I was its new keeper. Marcus waited in the grand foyer, standing next to a man I'd never seen before. The stranger wore an ill-fitting suit and clutched a worn briefcase. Samuel Thompson, according to the contract papers my father had slipped into my hand before I came upstairs. Miss Blackwood, Marcus nodded. Mr. Thompson here has an interesting proposition about funding the renovation. I studied Thompson carefully. Middle-aged, desperate eyes, wedding ring. A man with a family, with a future my family's legacy would erase. Let's talk in the study, I said, leading them away from the basement door. The study walls were lined with photographs, generations of Blackwoods standing proudly in front of their various properties. Now, I understood why none of the pictures included the previous owners. I understand you're having financial difficulties with the renovation, Thompson began, his voice trembling slightly. I represent certain investors who could help. I opened the contract my father had prepared. The terms were clear. Thompson would receive $5 million, enough to save his failing business and put his kids through college. In return, he and his entire family would forfeit their future existence in exactly 3 years. My hand shook as I placed the contract on the desk. One signature, and I would become just like my parents, like my grandfather, like all the Blackwoods before them, a collector of souls, a trader of fates. Mr. Thompson, I said slowly, before we discuss terms, I need to show you something. I led him back to the basement, ignoring my parents' shocked expressions when we entered the hidden room. Thompson's eyes widened as he took in the shelves of ledgers, the ancient desk, the feeling of otherworldly presence that permeated the space. What is this place? This, I said, pulling out the most recent ledger, is where we keep the real contracts. The ones that explain exactly what happens to people who make deals with my family. My father stepped forward. Olivia, stop this immediately. But I continued, showing Thompson the entries. The Harringtons, the Middletons, dozens of families who had vanished after signing away their futures. The money you're being offered isn't just money. It's lives, futures, stolen from people like you who were desperate enough to sign without understanding the true cost. The air in the room grew colder. In the corners of my vision, shadows moved in impossible ways. I felt them watching, waiting, those entities my father had mentioned. Olivia, my mother's voice was sharp with warning. You're endangering everything. No, I stood my ground. I'm ending everything. I turned to Thompson, who had gone pale. Go home to your family. Whatever trouble you're in, it's better than the alternative. Trust me. After Thompson flowed, I faced my parents. The ledgers began to vibrate on their shelves. Dark shapes coalesced in the shadows. Do you have any idea what you've done? My father's voice shook with rage and fear. The contracts must continue. The entities require regular tributes. Without new contracts, they'll take everything, my mother finished, including us. It's how the original deal was structured. The entities get everything if the Blackwood line fails to maintain the cycle. I picked up the oldest ledger, my great-grandfather's first record of deals and forfeitures. Then let them take it. The shadows in the room solidified into forms that hurt my eyes to look at. The temperature dropped to freezing. I found something else in these records, I continued, opening the book to a marked page. A clause in the original agreement. The entities can be bound and banished if someone of Blackwood blood willingly sacrifices the entire fortune. Everything gained through the contracts, freely given up. My parents lunged forward, but it was too late. I had already begun the words written in the margin of that first ledger, my great-grandfather's contingency plan that no Blackwood had ever been willing to use. The entities swirled around us, their presence becoming more solid with each word I spoke. The fortune my family had accumulated over generations, properties, money, stolen futures, began to dissolve. I felt it leaving. My trust fund, my apartments, everything I owned that had been bought with Blackwood money. More importantly, I felt the contracts breaking. Somewhere, the Harringtons were returning to existence. The Middletons were reclaiming their stolen futures. My parents screamed as their own wealth evaporated. The mansion itself began to fade, decades of stolen prosperity returning to their rightful owners. When it was over, we stood in an empty basement. No hidden room, no ancient desk, no ledgers full of dark contracts. Just concrete walls and the remnants of what had once been the Blackwood fortune. "What have you done?" my father whispered, looking at his empty hands. His signet ring had vanished with everything else. "I chose a different legacy," I answered. "One we can build ourselves without stealing other people's futures." My mother sank to the floor, her designer clothes replaced by simple garments. "We're nothing now." "No one." "No," I helped her up. "We're finally freed to be something real." Upstairs, Marcus and his renovation crew had vanished. The contract that brought them here no longer existed. The mansion was just a house now, old but ordinary. No more hidden rooms, no more dark secrets. I walked out the front door, where my car had been replaced by a modest used model, the last vestige of my previous life transformed into something honestly earned. The sun was setting over what had once been the Blackwood estate. Tomorrow, I would wake up just like everyone else, without wealth or privilege, but also without the weight of generations of stolen fates. I pulled out my phone and deleted the name Blackwood Properties from my contacts. It was time to build something new, something clean. As I drove away, I glanced in my rearview mirror. The mansion seemed smaller now, just another old house with history, but no more dark secrets. The entities were gone, the contracts broken, the futures returned. The Blackwood legacy was over, but mine was just beginning. 10 years later, I stood in front of a different building, the headquarters of New Horizons Development, my new company, built from scratch, with honest work and legitimate contracts. No hidden rooms, no stolen futures. My parents eventually adapted to normal life. My father found work as a real estate agent, dealing in actual properties instead of supernatural contracts. My mother started a small interior design business. We weren't wealthy anymore, but we were real. Sometimes late at night, I still dream about that hidden room and the entities that dwelled there. But then I wake up and look at what I've built, a life that's truly mine, a success that didn't cost anyone else their future. The plaque on my office wall reads, "Founded 2023, a new legacy, started by choice rather than inheritance." And in my desk drawer, I keep one thing from that old basement, a blank page from my great-grandfather's ledger, a reminder that sometimes the most valuable thing you can inherit is the chance to choose a different path. The Blackwood fortune may be gone, but in its place, something better grew, a family that finally learned the true meaning of building a legacy, one that doesn't require stealing someone else's future to secure your own.